Welcome, let's talk about video game bosses. They smash you, they bash you, they kill you. Some of them only kill you a couple of times, but others will kill you again and again till you get good or till you squeak like a little puppy. But which one is the hardest, the most inhumane boss we can come up with? I am here to pitch my idea of the most challenging and rather scary boss for the next Dark Souls game. I'm going to use book Women and Other Monsters by Jess Zimmerman to turn her ideas into the actual Souls game character. Let's jump to character creation. One of the reasons Souls games are so successful is because the story is never given to the player. The story is always slightly hidden and only revealed to the players through the veil of the world. So we're going to talk about fight, lore, character look, and the world. So let's jump to the lore, and I'm going to reveal you the character background story that will further serve to develop a character. Queen appeared in the kingdom when the young king retrieved her from her confinement in the tower. The wedding was held the next day after the arrival. Queen's beauty was astonishing. She was quiet, and her gaze was soft on servants and royals alike. Shortly after the wedding, Queen got pregnant, and the kingdom awaited the arrival of the royal heir. But the child was stillborn halfway through pregnancy. In her closet, she kept many herbs and preparations from her life in the tower, and rumors spread throughout the court that a witch in touch with the dark power cannot bear a child for a king. Couple buried many unborn children. Queen lived a solitary life in her quarters. Court doctors refused her the right to leave the castle or participate in royal feasts, fearing that excess activity could cause her health to decline and strangers' gaze may curse the child. Every evening along from the king, the queen would shut the door to her bedroom and her maids could hear the prolonged and quiet weeping. One night like that, the elder god gazed upon her bedroom. He made a contract with the queen, perhaps out of pity. From that day, the darkness hollowed all of the residents of the kingdom. Elder god granted the queen two gifts. One took away her beauty, and the other made her blind. From that day, the queen rules in darkness over the monsters or whatever remains of the kingdom. Now let's take a look at the world. From the lore, we know that the queen spends her youth in the tower and then she's moved to the castle, and that's where the boss fight will be. So the tower is important over here because it serves to highlight the queen's youth and her beauty. Perhaps the player needs to undertake a quest where they go to the tower to retrieve the key from the castle. Because obviously, the door cannot be opened from the side unless you first go on a rampage through the swamp. So the tower should have several components. The queen's room in the tower should show her youth and beauty. A garden and a storage in the tower need to highlight her connection to witchcraft and herbalism. We know that there are rumors in the castle that the queen is actually a witch in touch with the dark power. The connection between evil and beauty is critical for this character build. And I'm going to rely on the book over here, at least my understanding of it. Throughout history, women, especially beautiful or ugly, meaning all women, have been suspected as a source of a human miseries and evil. And as an author highlights in her book, woman that is beautiful has a treasure. But a treasure she didn't ask for. Beauty is a gift and it can be used to the benefit, but it is also a risk. Because the beauty is the power that cannot be controlled by a man. Beauty can only be taken from the woman through the violence or oppression. So yes, starting up beautiful is essential for this character. Now to the castle, because if you already understood, I'm using the typical story where the prince saves the queen, then they go and they get married, and then they supposedly happily live ever after. This has nothing to do with the book. I just lack imagination for anything more creative. So feel free to imagine the most Disney castle that got transported into the Dark Souls universe and got sprinkled with monsters. Castle has to have several notable features, especially the crippled king. See, in traditional view, a good woman is the woman that submits herself to others. Jess Zimmerman uses the term that I will probably use forever from now, calling it a bonsai human, a human that trims herself short and pretty to make others pleased. From the lore, we know that the queen was quiet and gentle when she arrived into the kingdom. The crippled king at the service of the queen needs to represent the opposite of a bonsai human. Now the queen is a lushy, overgrown tree, and she cannot be trimmed anymore. She overtook the kingdom and she took her power, and king is now at her service. Now hopefully our player makes it past the king. Now they can enter the castle, rest of the fire, and die 300 more times on the way to the queen. Maybe we can make a player jump on the little ledges right below the roof of the castle. All that while little minions spray them with poison. And don't forget, it needs to be so dark that the player barely sees their own character. It will be even better if the player has to take this path every time to get from the nearest fire to the queen. Every good boss fight has several components to it. So there is the fight start, There is first phase, transition, then second phase, and then the death of the boss. When the player first arrives to the queen, she needs to greet him in full beauty. I'm going back to the book here. The goal of picturing the queen as beautiful, feminine, is to show that she is just like any other woman, to tell the player that every woman can secretly be a monster, and no man is safe from encountering the beautiful and pretty woman that hides the devil on the inside. Once the queen realizes that the player is here to slay her, she needs to turn to her, call it, ugly form. If you remember from the story, she accepted 2 gifts from the elder god. One made her ugly and the other one made her blind, but we'll go to blindness a little later. Going to Jess's ideas in the book, the woman can choose to be ugly. So Queen herself uses the gift from the elder god and turns herself ugly to free herself from the conventional standard of beauty and the picture of a perfect queen. And Brewster's from The Witcher is the great example of ugliness in women monsters. Think something like fat, wrinkly, old, having hair everywhere else except for the head. Those are typical tropes of female ugliness in the conventional sense, something that makes the player ask, is this a woman? Is this also a person? Is this how we perceive women beyond the conventional beauty standards? Is she still like me? From now on, every time the player enters the stage for the fight, Queen will greet them with the phrase something like, "Look at what I am," to highlight that she is aware that she is actually a monster. Self-awareness is critical for women and also for female monsters, as highlighted in this book. Awareness is the protection instinct. It's a gift, but also a burden. Women need to be aware of everything around them, how they look, how they dress, who is in the room, what's for dinner, and when to pick kids from school. Awareness is a tool, but it is also something that adds tragedy to the queen and every woman. Queen would rather be a monster than a pretty woman at the head of the kingdom. She is not a bonsai human anymore, she's an overgrown tree. So at this phase and throughout the fight, her attacks are poison and sickle moves. Both are to highlight that she is a witch. She will occasionally jump on the player with unavoidable attack and drain portion of their stamina. This move is pretty significant because it highlights hunger. As the author highlights in her book, hunger is demonized in women. Be it hunger for food, sex, or attention. Well, in this case, it will be stamina. Women are expected to live off what they are given, be happy with what they have, and never ask for more. There is an excellent chapter in this book on Charybdis, the daughter of Poseidon and Gaia, who was turned into the monster that forever needs to swallow salty water of the sea just because she was too lustful. So hopefully the player makes it past the first stage and the boss goes into transition. In her transition, Queen needs to turn angry. Anger, just like hunger, is also demonized, and pretty much for the same reasons, that woman cannot be dissatisfied or unhappy with what she has. At this phase, Queen also needs to grow tentacles or wings or both, just to highlight, in the words of the author, that she is not just a woman, she is a woman and something else. And there is plenty of characters and bosses that already exist in the realm of being a woman and something else. Throughout the fight, Queen tracks the player by the sound. Blindness was her second gift from the Elder God. Blindness is a common archetype in female characters and monsters. Fates are blind. Justice is blind. But why? Jess Zimmerman highlights an interesting idea that women actually choose to be blind not to see their own mistreatment. And at the second phase, Queen will gain an additional really deadly move, which makes this character so challenging. She will jump on the player again, but this time it's not a stamina drain. This time it will be a one-shot attack. This one-shot attack cannot be dodged or blocked, it can only be parried. This is specifically to show high demand of the player. Women are known to be demanding. Your mom asks you to wash the dishes, your girlfriend requires attention. Women demand equal rights, equal political representation, access to healthcare, and equality across the board. All of those are rather scary because they make women act like humans rather than acting like women. So it only makes sense that the Queen demands nothing other than perfection from the player. Once we enter the last cutscene of the Queen's death, she needs to be taken away by the Elder God. And this is something that the Elder God again does out of mercy to pick up the Queen, so the other champion, in this case our character, would not make a use of her in another castle. Her death finally sets her free from her obligations as a queen and sets her free to be herself. Once the character sets the Queen free, the Queen quarters and the graveyard will be open to explore for the player. As the player enters the quarters, they see tools and herbs that clearly suggest that the Queen was pregnant multiple times, and all of those pregnancies were interrupted by her own hand. This idea is later solidified by the presence of the child graves at the backyard. And by the way, I'm going to the final chapters of the book over here. Jess Zimmerman suggests that the most atrocious activity that female monster can undertake is to deny their obligation to make kids. So the Queen denies her social obligations, her beauty, and her youth, all in attempt to be herself rather than be a queen. So this is the queen, the hardest boss that I can come up with. She is portrayed here as a monster, boss, something that you need to fight. But the question remains, is she indeed a monster, or is she just a woman like any other? Thank you for joining me today. This was my attempt to cover ideas from Women and Other Monsters by Jess Zimmerman. Amazing book, I really liked it, highly recommend if you're interested in feminist literature. If you have any ideas for which topics and books I should explore next, leave me a comment below. Otherwise, see you on the next book. You may think that whole this video is just an overthinking session, which in part it is, don't get me wrong. But the Firekeeper in the Dead Souls games, they are blind, and the reason they are blind is so that they do not see the future without fire and do not abandon their fate. Dark Souls already has a blind female character that would rather not see what they don't want to see.